Cameron, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Dion. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the background of your business and how it all sort of came to be?
Yeah, I've been in the industry since the sort of early mid-1990s, and I got into the industry through an injury. I was an aspiring young footballer, had a serious back injury at 18 years of age, was told I'd never be physically active ever again. And that sort of led me to studying and doing a lot of research around anatomy and training and physiology, etc. So I've been fortunate to have a variance of roles over nearly 30 years now. Sort of, I guess there's two parts to it. 15 years of my life was working with athletes and team sports in elite sport environments, and the other 15 years has been working in the commercial fitness space in a variance of roles, but predominantly sort of personal training and rehabilitation. So young family, wanted to get out of sport because it's fairly demanding on your time and travel and so on, and thought, how do I utilise my skills and the IP that I've developed over those sort of nearly 30 years and create an opportunity for myself to have my own business and hopefully to have a business that will allow others to also have their own businesses through franchising. So yeah, I spent a lot of time in 2013 and 14 doing research, what's happening in the global commercial space. Group training was trending, and I guess what I saw was that I saw a gap in the market, what I thought was a gap in the market, an opportunity to exploit my skill set and IP, and I saw some problems that I thought I could solve in the industry. And so in 2015, really, I got to work trialing a few things and starting to really play around with different concepts whilst continuing to do research. And so BFT really, I guess, is the culmination of nearly 30 years of experience in the industry and taking some of the best stuff I've learned from working with athletes and some of those practices and also a mindset in terms of being results driven, and then also seeing and experience what I have in the commercial space and where do I see the gaps, what do I see as the problems, and how can I play a part in solving some of these problems. That's sort of how it was developed.
Yeah, and so in terms of, do you want to just explain for listeners how your business and what you guys do is different to other, because to the average punter, I guess, they would classify a lot of these businesses in a similar vein and not understand the nuance, I guess. So, and I imagine it's quite a bit of that.
Yeah, and to be really, it's a good question, Dion. We really struggled to actually articulate that, to really succinctly in that elevator pitch articulate how we are different. Our tagline is actually different, better. And it was because we really struggled to articulate that. Essentially, we're group training, but we're a strength-based group training methodology. And we use, I believe, strength underpins all physical performance. So we have 13 core programs. Strength or resistance training is predominantly 9 out of those 13 programs. Yep. We do cardiovascular and high-intensity training, but the key thing that differentiates us is that we have a progressive periodized model. And what that means is that all of our training programs are done over an 8-week training block, and they ebb and flow over that 8 weeks, and they give the members the opportunity to continually progress, not just in their cardiovascular fitness, but in the skills associated with strength training. So, for example, getting more efficient at doing a deadlift before you then go and lift heavy weights deadlifting.
Yep.
And so I guess one of the problems I saw was there's 30, 40 people going into a group training class, and they're all doing the same thing, and they're expected to all do the same thing. And that's just not the real world. We all go into a gym with different training history, different injury history, different genetics and propensity to be potentially dominant in aerobic training versus power training as an example. And when you work with athletes, in a squad in the AFL as an example, you have roughly 47 athletes. They're all different, and they're all at different stages of their journey. And so it's bringing that methodology and mindset that, well, we've got the team goal. So there's the team program, and that's periodized and progressed over years. But within that, there's 47 individual programs as well. And so we progress our training over 8 weeks to give people the opportunity to learn the skills and also develop in their fitness and strength. But there's not an expectation that you and I will always do the same exercises. So we have built into our software progression. So people are really advanced. We can continue to keep progressing them. Equally, if you've got injuries or you've got a limitation with a training background, we can also pull you back a step or two and take you back to an appropriate level and then build you back up over that eight-week training block so that you can get that sense of achievement. And then we do that in the group training environment. Our businesses are built, BFT is built off community. And so it's giving people an environment where they feel really comfortable, supported, much like being in a sporting team. You're having fun, you've got familiar faces. And that's actually what gets people coming back is the community and the fun family element of our business model.
Yeah. And in terms of the sort of programs you're describing, and do you find that it's a more sophisticated type of person in terms of their training and education or knowledge of fitness that comes to you guys, or do you guys bring that sort of level of sophistication to the program for them?
Yeah, we get a bit of both. The latter is probably the most common. It's making, I guess, complex concepts with training and exercise prescription, and loading, whether it's loading with weights or cardiovascular loading with heart rate training, and it's simplifying that for the weekend warrior.
Yeah, right.
We do get a lot of, team sport athletes, AFL players, rugby players come in their off season and utilise the programs because they understand that it's got a methodology and a validated scientific principles behind it. But ultimately, we're designed for the weekend warrior.
Yeah.
But what we do really well is we build our software and our technology to take really complex concepts and simplify them so that the data and the information the members getting is simple and meaningful, which is really important because there is so much data now readily available to the weekend warrior, whether it's GPS watches or heart rate, etc. And often people don't know how to decipher that. So we keep it as simple as we possibly can. We make it as meaningful as we can so that we're constantly giving them, validated information that helps them to make decisions going forward on their health and fitness journey.
Yeah. And so how do you go from, you said you started the business 15 years ago, is that right?
No. We started BFT. The concept was started in 2015.
Oh, okay. Right.
Started working on the business plan and the concept. I opened up 4 pilot sites through 2016 and 2017 to prove the model and try and validate the model as well as make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And then in April of 2018, we started franchising.
Yeah, okay. And how do you go from that sort of early stage, like say, proving the model, and what made you go with 4 sites to start with rather than just 1?
I think primarily we got the first one wrong, to be honest. So we got the space wrong, worked out very quickly that we needed to get more bums on seats, so we needed a bigger space.
Yep.
It was really important, I think, to test it in different markets. So if you just go to one market and it's working, that's not reflective of, say, having a CBD location and then having a location in, say, Seymour in rural Victoria. Very different demographics, different overlays in terms of the population, different transient populations and those sorts of things. So I did 4 to really learn those lessons and to be able to say to potential investors, if we got it right, that 1, I've invested my money and I've actually walked in your shoes, but 2, we've proven the model across 4 different regions with different populations and demographics, and one of the shop fronts is on the high street, one's on an industrial estate, one's one block back on a first floor of a commercial building. So it was important to prove, for me, the concept in different areas, but in different situations as well in terms of real estate. It really helped us sell once we started to franchise. There was that level of authenticity that wasn't just, an indicative P&L off one set of numbers. We had 4 live actual sets of numbers that we could show people. We could get them to test and feel the product in 4 different locations. So I just added a deeper layer of validating the model across a whole different range and levels that gave investors confidence that, you've done your research as well as put your money where your mouth is. And I think that's quite powerful. It was something that someone had advised me to do in the really early days.
Yeah. And so you're thinking from the start to make this big. You're not thinking from the start, and everyone's different the way they go about business, right? You're not thinking, we'll start one, we'll see how it goes and see what happens. You're thinking expansion from the very start, or very early on by the sounds of it, with a plan to take it much bigger.
Yeah, I did. As I said, that I saw an opportunity to try and solve a couple of problems in the industry, and once I'd really worked out that I really thought that I could contribute to solving these problems, you can only really solve them if you go big.
Yeah.
And so the three issues that I saw were that the average lifespan of a personal trainer in our industry is 9 months. So there's a lot of people qualifying. There's a lot of people investing in getting themselves educated and qualified, but there's a problem in the industry, like why aren't they staying? So how could I build a business model that allowed or gave the opportunity for passionate people in our industry to have a career and a livelihood through exploiting my IP? The other was in the training side, which we just touched on, which, why is it that these training principles and methodologies and periodized concepts are only available for the elite athletes when it's not new knowledge? It's not meant to be just for the elite. Why aren't we utilizing this information and making it readily available for the weekend warrior and the everyday gym goer? And then the third was education. And I mean, I've been fortunate to do multiple degrees and have a master's degree in strength and conditioning and sports science. The expectation isn't that everyone should have that. And a lot of people don't want to go to those lengths. So a lot of education in the industry has gone to online. And I think it has its place, but we're in the people business, and you, as a trainer, you're constantly engaging with individuals, and there's a lot that you need to know from a personal engagement, reading body language. Where do you stand? How do you position? So, like, how do you be a really good coach? How do you be a good listener? What are the cues that you need to look for? So the third was education and developing a lot of face-to-face education so that we could give those really passionate people the skills to be able to be better coaches and continue their own professional development journey, to keep them excited and keep them in the industry. So it was really, they were the three things that I saw, and went, okay, if I can go around solving those three problems, or first of all, trying to get a solution, the only way to shift the dial is to have a really big member database and to sell a lot of franchises. So the goal is 1,000 franchises by the end of 2023. So we're at about 550 sold franchises in 60 countries around the world.
How many countries, sorry, Cam?
We're in 6 countries.
6 countries, okay, yep.
Yeah,
which is your biggest country that you've got? I assume it's Australia, but outside of that?
Biggest country in sold and open sites is Australia. This year in the US, we've partnered with a NASDAQ listed company called Exponential Fitness. So they sell the BFT brand in North America, and they're just approaching 200 sales just this year. So they're on a bit of a trajectory to surpass our sales where we are in Australia. But Australia is a big market for us. Singapore and then New Zealand are our strongest markets at the moment.
Yeah, okay. And were you always going to go into business? Was it something you always sort of had in the back of your mind, or was it sort of when you're younger, was it to be, to play footy, and then that changes and then you go down a different path? What was the dream from when you were young?
Well, it was to play footy. And as I said, I sustained a pretty serious back injury, and that really, I guess, changed a whole lot in my life and changed my perspective on a few things. I've always been entrepreneurial, but sort of never really had traditional jobs as a kid. So things like selling, the record of the AFL and the footy as a kid, you learn to sell. You learn pretty quickly that if you want to hustle and you have a go, you can make really good money. And so I never did the traditional kind of Kmart or Macca's or anything like that.
Yeah,
I tended to always be in jobs where I could see that if I put myself out there and if I was willing to learn and work hard, that there was bigger rewards. And so throughout my career, I've sort of flirted in between being entrepreneurial and running my own sort of small businesses, then going back in a corporate world, so to speak, with an elite sporting team and being on a regular paycheck, and then going back out and working myself back into sport. So ultimately, I think I was always going to be in this position. I always had that entrepreneurial bent. I just needed to find the right opportunity. And I think I got to a stage in my life where I sat down with my wife and had a discussion and said, look, I think I really want to go down this path. We'd spent years, building ourselves up, her chasing her career and me with mine, and, got the house and paid off the house. And now you're all of a sudden facing this decision that you're going to risk it all. And the honest discussion we had was, do we want to risk everything to have a go versus, maybe be sitting in our late 60s and 70s still questioning what if? And I just couldn't live with that. So the opportunity for me was throw everything at it, be prepared to lose it. But that in itself is an amazing motivator and driver. So that was the decision, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, that's not for everybody, is it? But I mean, like you say, and it resonates with me, even just in terms of you don't want to get to a certain age and just wonder, well, what if we had have had a go? You're far better off finding and let the chips fall where they may. But at least right? Whether you were good enough to achieve it or not, you'll learn things from it. It's all about the journey in the end, and put yourself out of your comfort zone and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think, I had a really good times working in sport. They're great organisations. It's high pressure, which I really like. Your week and your livelihood is defined by a win and a loss. But I always found I was always frustrated that I couldn't do more, or that there was sort of a bit of an old boys kind of school mentality thinking with some of the old footballers. And when I look back through my career and went through all the times where I was really successful, was when I was in 100% control of my own destiny. And that was really, really powerful, taking time to do that reflection and look at that and say, well, okay, well, when I have invested in things and I've been able to influence them significantly, I've always done well.
Yeah. And
so whilst that's not maybe the reason to do it and take the big leap, I had a little bit of a taste of that. So that gave me confidence that I'm motivated enough, I'm a hard worker, I'll seek to find solutions and make things happen, because I had done that in the past.
Yep.
This was obviously a much bigger opportunity that I was looking to take on. But I think that frustration of working in the corporate space for me, if you ask my wife, she'll say I've hardly ever come home in the last 7 or 8 years frustrated and complaining, whereas I used to do that a lot working for someone else. So I think that's just my personality, and I'm meant to be where I am right now, to be honest.
Well, it's your control of your own destiny, right? In many respects. It's up to you. Whereas when you're with a corporate or another firm, whatever it might be, there's certain rules you got to go by. And freeing yourself from that does change your whole perspective, and it gives you that control to make quicker decisions, to do things how you want. And it's a game changer, really.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's a really salient point, is that you can do things quicker, you can move them along, there's not as much bureaucracy, the buck stops with you, and if it's successful, great, and if it's not, well, you've got to wear it as well. And I really love that responsibility, and we've been able to scale because we've been able to be fluid and move quickly and make decisions and not get caught up in the red tape and the bureaucracy and the hierarchy. So that really resonates with me, and it's something that as we're growing and getting into sort of a medium-sized business now, with network-wide revenues of around 120 million a year, that we're trying really hard to keep that small business mentality whilst transitioning to a medium-sized business.
Yeah, okay. So that's a challenge. What's the biggest strength you bring to this now, as you've grown the business with your background, and how's that helped you sort of succeed?
Yeah, I'm naturally a systems and processes person. So for me, it's really problem solving and developing the systems and processes to streamline things and get things moving as efficiently as we possibly can. I constantly just, look at things in the business and we'll get frustrated if it's not, really seamlessly humming along as efficient as it could be. So definitely problem solving and finding those systems and processes. I've got a great work ethic. I love what I do. I love working hard. I sort of can't sit still. So I think coming from performance background is you're being singularly focused. I don't get distracted. I don't, I don't read fiction books as an example. I hardly read a newspaper. I've been offered advisory roles and so on and so forth. And I'm able to just be singularly focused on BFT and what our strategic goals and objectives are. And I think that's quite powerful. A lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with it, have different interests in their life. I don't. My 100% of my life is this business and BFT. And I think that's really strong and powerful and something that I bring because I live and breathe this. And whilst I keep an eye on what's happening in the industry and keep an eye on technologies and innovations that we can maybe look to adopt or improve upon, everything I do has a BFT lens. And so I'm not singularly focused where we're not taking on advice or we're seeking out other opportunities. It's just not getting distracted with other business opportunities that come my way. I'm someone that if I'm going to do it, I want to do it 100% and throw everything into it. And so, yeah, I think that singular focus has really helped the business and continues to help the business. And I just bring a level of passion. You know, it's something that started in the dining room of my home, you know, in 2015. Right. And even now we've got a big team and we've got great people in the organisation who drive the business forward. I'm still able, I guess, to have that founder's lens on the business. And, you know, I've already know what's going to happen in 2, 3, 4 years' time from an innovation perspective. And so having that lens is quite powerful as a founder, which is very different to other people in the business. So, it's probably that problem solving is probably the big thing in the systems and processes.
And that focus, though, in terms of like you say, there's always be something that comes up where there's lots of opportunities, lots of ideas, but being able to be, like you say, singularly focused on execution is a really underrated attribute in business.
Yeah.
Because there's especially if you're entrepreneurial, there's always something that looks like it'll be great and the next shiny thing. And there's so many people that will get distracted by those things that the ability to say no and understand this is where we're going, this is what we're doing. That's, you know, 80, 90% of actually what matters with execution is actually just sticking to the plan and getting it done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, not get distracted with the shiny thing across here that, you know, goes ping. It is really powerful and it also is very easy to get distracted. We're at a conference in Bangkok and someone said, "What are you looking at next? You know, what are you going to do?" And I'm not doing anything. I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. Staying singularly focused. And I think we also have, as a franchisor, and you have a responsibility to the people who've invested in your business to make sure you are singularly focused and making sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure their investment is a good one. So we never lose sight of that. The three key stakeholders in the franchise world are, you know, our franchisees, our members, and then thirdly, us as the franchisor. So it's keeping focus on those three key stakeholders and making sure that they're all winning, because if one of those three breaks down, we all lose. And so it's just, never losing sight of that.
And Cam, in terms of, like, you're talking about revenues approaching sort of 120 million a year and that sort of thing, have you noticed any major changes in the way you have to go about business when you're sort of starting at, you know, your first years and you get to 1.2 and then the jump to 12 and then the jump to, you know, 120? What sort of changes have you seen when things start to go up by an order of magnitude to get to the next level?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I said earlier, we've really tried to keep that really small company mentality whilst we are growing. The big change is probably just the management of staff, the people. You're not as close, like I'm not as close now to the first 100 franchisees as I am with the second 100, and 200 and 300. So that's really challenging, because I still see, even though I've got a great sales team and great franchise performance team who have most of the touch points with franchisees, I'm still every day really humbled that people are investing in our brand and the product that I developed as a founder. So I want to have that contact with them and I want to look them in the eye and make them the promise, but you can't get around to everyone. And so that's a challenge in terms of just a personal challenge, making sure that, again, you've just got the right people, you're investing in the right people in your business, you're giving them the right tools and empowering them to really drive performance and those relationships, and making sure that if we can't have the relationships as a franchisor, there are other people in our business that are. Just having a coffee with franchisees and talking on a personal level, because there is the business side of what we do, but so much of franchising is relationship driven as well, and it's how they're feeling about the promises that we've made as a franchisor. You know, where can we be better? We constantly do surveys with our franchisees and members and get that feedback, but to sit down and eyeball someone's really powerful. So, but they're just, you know, growing pains. You need to be more efficient with all systems and processes through your business. You need to be more consistent with your decision making. So, you know, not doing a deal with the franchisee over here, because you need to be consistent across the whole network, so that when we look at our franchisees in the eye and someone says, oh, you know, you gave Dion a great deal over here, we can say, well, actually, no, we didn't. We've been really consistent with what we offer across the group, because ultimately they're going to get a conference. They're going to have a skin full of grog at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're all going to start talking. And we need to make sure that we're fair across the group. So it's getting that fairness, which is one of the, you know, values that we really hold highly in our business, top down through all our staff, that this is how we operate, communicating that and making sure that everyone's on board. And as you continue to grow, we have staff in, you know, 5 or 6 countries around the world now. It's making sure that they understand that too, and that they've bought into the values of the business, and that's getting conveyed down the line, because it's really easy to lose that. We could control it when we're small, but, you know, now that we're building into a medium-sized business, it's hard to control those things. So it's just getting a bit more tighter on processes and accountabilities across the business, so that we don't slip up. We don't have those slip ups and make mistakes that we could easily come into the business. And the last thing we want is franchisees questioning our integrity or our direction that we're going and where we're investing our money. And so we try and cut that noise out and communicate a lot, communicate succinctly to our network, and make sure everyone's really aware and understanding of the decisions that we're making and why, and how it positively influences everyone within the business, because it's just hard getting to everyone across 6 countries these days. So communication's something that we're really focused on.
And in terms of all of those sorts of things, when you weigh up all the different decisions you've had to make along the way, is there anything that sort of stands out as the best sort of decisions, or the most important decision you've made and sort of got right along the way, that's made a major difference?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I guess the biggest decision for me was starting the business. And actually having a crack. I think not so much a decision, but being open to making mistakes. You're just going to make mistakes. So being open and honest with yourself that you're going to make them, but be open to learning the lessons and have some sort of critical self-evaluation process in place. I think one of the best decisions I made was getting investment on. As a founder, once I got into that second year, we had the 4 sites going. You're wearing a lot of hats, and, you know, you're pouring a lot of money into the business. You're not getting a lot back. There's 4 sites. They're at that stage. They're on a license agreement. We weren't officially a franchise at that point in time. So not a lot of income coming in, a lot of money going out the door, building out the IP of the business and software and so on. And you start to wear the sales hat, the marketing hat, the operational hat, the tech hat, you know, the training hat. So I was really fortunate. I had an opportunity to take on some investment, but it was really important to me that anyone who invested in the business was going to actually have genuine skin in the game, and that they bought complementary skill sets, but also were aligned from a values perspective. And I took on 2 business partners in late 2017, Richard and Hamish. Hamish is a silent investor, but comes in every month on a board meeting, and he's very good strategically. And Richard Burnett works in the business with me day to day. So he brought a complementary skill set to me, and that was fantastic, because what it did was allow me to focus on building out the IP and everything that we could commercialize and sell. Technology and hardware, etc. Education. And then he had a really strong brand and sales background, so he could really take that off me as well. So we had a pipeline, or I had a pipeline of potential franchisees ready to go. So we just worked hard through the latter part of 2017, finalising the franchise agreements and operational manuals and FDDs, etc. And then we felt really comfortable that off the back of the initial foresights and all the learnings that we had and strong supply partner agreements, etc., that we were ready to roll it out. So we launched in April of 2018, but certainly that's probably the best decision I've made is being open to take on those partners, but also incentivizing them enough so that they feel a really strong part of the business and they're not just sort of minority stakeholders, that they've got a fair bit of skin in the game, and that whilst I had the most to lose probably, but we've all got a lot to lose. And that's really powerful when you've got business partners and you're all in the same position.
And you've made subsequent decisions to bring on investment, right? In terms of the partners from the US and that sort of stuff, and that's taken it to the next level again.
Yeah, it was a really big decision. We'd had offers in the business, and to be honest, a lot more money, but most of those offers were, hand over the keys and see you later. And we just weren't prepared to do that at this point in time. We'd just gone through the 2 years of COVID, which were really disruptive to the business. In particular, our growth in America, where we'd invested a lot of money, and we had a company-owned site in Santa Monica. And so we just made a decision that it wasn't about the money. We still had a lot to do for ourselves personally in terms of our goals, but also for our franchisees. And the opportunity came up with Exponential Fitness that we could partner with them. They purchased the IP, but over this first 12 months, we continued to largely run the IP and continue to develop it. They sell the brand in America and Canada and North America, and we own the brand and the rights everywhere else globally outside of North America. So we share off each other's sales and in terms of financially. So it's a really aligning relationship. Very different to most sort of private equity type relationships. We didn't want to do that. I wasn't prepared to jump into bed with a private equity firm. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, I think it really changes how you operate.
It does change. It changes everything, right? Because suddenly you've got a big partner involved who are really they know private equity. They know how to have everything, all those agreements and everything from a private equity perspective. Suddenly it's all under their rules, and it's a very different dynamic. And if you're not ready for that, or if that's not the sort of thing you're after, it changes the whole dynamic. I've spoken to multiple people on that front. And like you say, it's not necessarily bad. It's just a very different dynamic, and you have to be ready for what that means.
Yes.
In terms of control, in terms of autonomy, and a whole range of different aspects.
Yeah, and we just weren't prepared to. We understood it. We understood what it would mean, and it would significantly change the control, but also the day-to-day operational mandate. And we weren't prepared to change that. We felt like we were doing a really good job. We're the fastest growing franchise group in the country. Through 2021, through COVID, we sold over 120 franchises. So we felt like the hard work that we'd done previously was putting us in a good position. And the decision was really in the US that we had invested a lot of money, and we really, really didn't have the opportunity to exploit that because of COVID. We couldn't travel. We couldn't get over there. We tried putting people on the ground. It was really hard to manage them from afar.
Yep.
So it was a great opportunity. We're able to take some cash off the table and de-risk a little bit, but it also still gave us a certain amount of control, as well as obviously the rights to the brand globally outside of North America. So great upside for Exponential Fitness, great upside for us. We will really benefit from some of the expertise and sophistication that they have. They're a billion-dollar business. They've got 10 brands. They're really heavy in the technology space. So just buying power will help us, with them, on equipment pricing as an example, which then flows down to our franchisees. So that was an opportunity that came up that was just really aligning. Anthony Geisel, their CEO, we talk about values. He's really aligned. We get on well. He's a great guy, and our values are really aligned. So it just felt like the right thing to do. And as I said, we keep a certain amount of control of the brand, even though they own the IP. We have a large say, given that we're the largest market for them globally.
Yeah. Cam, would you, in terms of other people in sort of similar positions, think about partnerships with, other investors or strategic investors or private equity or whatever it might be? Is there any advice you'd give them in terms of the key things that were most important to you as you were sort of working out, like you said, you had other offers that were bigger or different and that sort of thing? What would you tell other people in this, thinking of the same sorts of things?
Yeah, I think I have
Or
a
is it-
different lens. I think as a founder of a business, I think you have a very different lens to, and Richard, who I work with closely, who we co-CEO together and came in a couple of years into the journey. We're very aligned, but the founder just has a very different lens, I think, on the business because you've just been through something that not a lot of people go through, and you've taken risks and you've been through that real pain. And I was operating in an office that had no air conditioning and heating, and in the middle of winter, my fingers were numb as I was typing and trying to grow this thing, on the smell of an oily rag. So I think for me, it's making sure people understand your vision and where you're going. You've definitely got to be aligned from a values perspective. You've really got to spend enough time with a potential investor on a personal level, because I don't think money's hard to find. I think that's the easy bit. You've got to get people who you really, really are aligned with. Business, where's it going? How can they help? What's their skill set? What's the value they can add to your business? Because again, the money's the easy bit. We can find money. It's how can people with money help your business and therefore their business to grow and prosper. So what skills do they bring? What's their values? And not just putting in money and then having a say or being hands off and asking have you hit the budgets? It's trying to get, for me, it was getting people who are aligned with you and wanted skin in the game to drive the business forward and ride the ups and downs, because the reality is it's not all sunshine. So if you're going to get investors, make sure that you have those conversations. It's a marriage, like it really is a marriage. And I spend more time with Rich here in the office than I do with my wife. So it's important that we're transparent, our values are aligned. We understand there's going to be tough times, so that you communicate openly and you're prepared to take some honest feedback and have those discussions. I think that's really, really important. And then there's just an element of trust. You've just got to trust each other. But if you're bringing on investment and they understand the vision, that they buy into that vision, and you have those discussions around, you've just got to trust that we're doing a good job and we're going to continue to grow it. Not to say that we know everything, but then I think they're the really key things: trust and values and alignment.
Yeah. And in terms of, you mentioned COVID before and how difficult that was. Is that the biggest challenge you come across as you've gone through this journey, or are there other things that have been sort of tougher than that, or what's some examples?
Yeah, there's probably two that stand out. On a personal level, we've had a competitor that's had us in the courts since early 2017, and that's been just more for me a real challenge, just time and energy, and also trying to protect, I guess, the staff and our franchisees from getting too distracted or anxious and nervous about where that might go, because it's been in the public domain in terms of the news, as well as it's obviously going through the courts. So that for me was really, really, really tough. It was 5 years of constant legal battles, and sort of wore the brunt of that from a company perspective as the figurehead, and took on most of that. So we had early this year some really positive rulings in the courts, and it was quite an interesting time, because the staff and everyone was so excited when the rulings were handed down, and I just had this overwhelming emotional state where I just wanted to go to the corner and cry, because it was 5 years of my life that I'll never get back. And so that's really challenging, and it's challenging to just put on the brave face and be quite stoic about it in front of the staff and franchisees. And
because that's the mental battle, right? That's the stuff that goes unseen, and it takes that's the test of your resilience, and not just as a founder, as a human.
Yeah, it does. And 5 years is a long time to go through it. So yeah, that was really challenging personally. It's obviously challenging financially, because the only people that win are the lawyers. But COVID absolutely was, we had just started to really get momentum as a brand. We were getting, as I said, a lot of interest in the US off the back of investing heavily. The brand was going really strong. Our sales, November, December, January, just before COVID hit in March of 2020, was strong. And in reality, no one knew what was going to happen. I mean, to be honest, we thought by June of 2020 we were done with this thing. We thought it would be a bad flu, and then we're all play on. So 2 years later, especially in Melbourne, where one of the most locked down cities in the world and where our head office is, that was a real challenge. And because we had various jurisdictions, Singapore was opening and closing, New Zealand was the same, even states within Australia. We had at one point in time something like 13 different jurisdictions with different sets of rules and regulations around COVID.
Yep.
So we then had to invest in a team. We actually quadrupled our staff through COVID. So we took a view that here's an opportunity that we can either sort of shut up shop, lay everyone off and stand them down, which was fairly standard, or let's take a risk here and let's invest in people and more support for our franchisees. Let's invest in building technology and getting ahead of all the things that you want to get to on a day-to-day basis that you're just too busy to do. And so it was challenging because we didn't have any income coming in. We decided to cut all fees. We worked really hard with our partners to support our franchisees. And as I said, we took on more human resources with no income. So pretty stressful times. It's easy to be on the other side of it and go, well, it was a great decision, but you never really know how that's going to pan out. The one thing I think we realised really early on was that our franchisees needed a lot of support. And a lot of that was just emotional. It was a phone call. It was someone to speak to. We had a franchisee, a couple that in Ringwood in Melbourne here, that he just quit his job. He'd invested in the business. They opened their doors on the Saturday, had their launch day, great, fantastic launch day. And then on the Monday morning, the country was shut down. And so we have a real sense of responsibility that whilst we can't influence and control what's going on with COVID, there are things that we can do, that we can control and influence. So, yeah, it was a really challenging time, and you're investing heavily, you're spending a lot of money, and you just do not know when is this going to end and how's it going to pan out. We stood all of our staff down for about 5 days and went, no, let's bring them all back on and let's invest in them, and what we ultimately tried to do was make sure that, one, we never lost any franchisee through COVID. So that was the goal number one, and we were really proud that we didn't lose any franchisees. And two, was that we just created a lot of goodwill and community within our own franchisees and our staff, and that coming out the other side was surely going to hold us in good stead. So yeah, it was a really, really, really tough. I think, franchisees that I talked to in Queensland and Adelaide, South Australia, still don't have any concept of what really happened in Melbourne, Victoria, because Melbourne, Victoria was so challenging and demanding that they didn't have a feel for it at all. It was just so hard here. You go back and think about it now that you could only leave your house for 1 hour a day, and within a 5K radius, people would go, really? Yeah. So yeah, that was challenging. It was challenging keeping staff motivated. They're working from home. They've all got different circumstances. Some have families, some are isolated on their own in an apartment. And it's also making sure that mentally their health is in good order as well. So that was absolutely the most challenging time, I think, in our business, no doubt about it.
I mean, that's a really important perspective on managing COVID, because the easiest thing to do, presumably, like you sort of touched on, would be to stand people down, to close, to shrink. And it takes remarkable leadership, I think, to actually go the other way in the face of unknowns and sort of say we don't want to lose any franchisee, and then to go through the other side and come through the other side of that. That's a brave call to start with, and then to actually execute that is quite remarkable, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we had our moments, and I'll be honest, and that goes back to that. I think as a leader, you have to have a certain, forward-facing persona to the network and the people who your key stakeholders, that to give them the confidence that you guys have got it under control, and also so that they can really understand that we're making decisions in their best interest. Yeah. So getting on a lot of Zoom calls and having regular contact with them, but to be honest, at the end of every day, Richard and I would talk, and we'd have the real life conversations of, wow, like we could be in a lot of trouble here if
I can imagine
X, Y, and Z don't pan out. So even just that's challenging, knowing that you're really vulnerable, but you've got to keep that stoic face and that level-headed, sort of positive approach to your key stakeholders and investors, when in reality, there's just so much that was out of our control. And we made a decision, Dion. We said, everyone was talking about they don't want to be defined by COVID and everything else. And we said, no, let's be defined by it. Like, actually, let's take it on and meet it on head on, and let's take on the challenge and let's be defined by it and come out the other side and see how we stand up, so to speak. And we're very grateful and fortunate that we came out the other side in a pretty good position.
Yeah, it's a good approach. It's an unusual approach compared to many businesses, right? Cam, in terms of advice you've been given along the way, what's held you in good stead as you've gone in through the business journey from other people that have given you advice?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. We had a close family friend who was in the franchising space many years ago in Australia with a sports brand, and he said, look, if you want to do franchising, you need to walk in the shoes of where your franchisees are going to walk. So spend your own money, invest in company-owned sites, make those mistakes, understand all the weaknesses in your businesses, work really hard to overcome them and put processes and things in place so that you have the answers for your franchisees. And that for me, in terms of just the franchising space, was the best bit of advice I got. Because to your point earlier, like, you asked, why did I do 4 sites instead of 1? That came out of conversations with this gentleman, Des, and just the ability to look franchisees and investors in the eye and say, I've actually walked in your shoes, or the shoes that you're about to walk in, I've been there. And I've spent the money and I've felt the pain, and I've also seen the upside. And so I feel really confident that I've got all the support mechanisms in place and I've got the answers for you when you have questions and when you maybe stumble. My job and our responsibility as a franchisor is to have learnt those lessons and to be there to pick you up and keep driving forward. So, that's really powerful. Our obligation is to set people up for success. And it's really hard to do that if you haven't actually experienced it yourself, and if you haven't fallen yourself. So that definitely was the best bit of advice for me, was get your hands dirty, spend your money, and stumble and fall and pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, learn the lessons, and continue forward again. Yeah, it was really powerful.
Best way to learn in any subject or any industry, right, is to learn by doing. Yeah,
absolutely.
And when you've got franchisees, if you can look them in the eye, like you say, and say, we've been there, we understand that, it gives you a totally different perspective. And even if it's just in terms of a genuine insight into what they're going through, it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I've got a final 4 questions. I'll just quick fire ones. Who's the business person that inspires you the most, and why?
This is a really good question. I love anyone who has a go in life, and whether they have success or failures. I just love learning the lessons and reading about those stories, whether it's business or sport. I mean, Richard Branson's probably someone who I just love because of his sheer enthusiasm and passion for everything he does. He's not financially literate. He's got dyslexia and struggles with some of those things, and that hasn't gotten in the way at all. I really just love that he has this mindset that anything's possible, and you're passionate about it, you're enthusiastic, and you're prepared to work hard at it, then you really can make anything happen. And so I find him really inspirational. But anyone who has a crack in life, for be sport or business or other, I love when people put it on the line and they're prepared to lose it. I'm really, really fascinated and impressed by that.
Yep, I like that. What about business books? Best business books you've read?
Yeah, probably Tim Ferriss's book, The Tribe of Mentors.
Yeah.
What I love about that book is that you're reading and learning off so many people, so then that leads to further reading and learning. It's not just, I guess, one book from one author or one successful person. It's Tim doing a lot of interviews with a whole range of people from various industries and backgrounds. And as you read the book, and I go back and reread, and something else always resonates with me every time I read it, and inspires me to do more reading and learning. So I think that for me has been a great book.
That is a great book, and the way done that, the sort of the questions in there, that actually was a part of the inspiration for how I sort of did my podcast, was to see the learnings from that particular book, because of how he did that and how many people like you say, there's so many people in there that you get different insights from. It's fantastic to learn from, right? Because there's just so many. Every story is 2 or 3 pages, 4 pages, whatever it is. They're not long, but you get so much insight in one book. It's fantastic. What about quotes on business, life, leadership? Anything that you sort of live by?
Yeah, I've probably got 3. Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan, yeah.
Michael Jordan had a quote, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And
good quote.
I just think that resonates across all aspects of life, that give it a go. You're going to miss some, but you don't have a go, you're going to miss out completely. I had an old footy coach in the AFL that had a really good quote that has really resonated with me in more in particular in recent times, that as the business has grown and we've got more people that I've had to let go, and is never overestimate your self-importance and never underestimate your influence.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, really powerful statement, in organisations, especially for leaders, that yes, you have a role to play, but ultimately you know better than anyone else in the organisation. So just don't overestimate how important you are, but also realise your influence that you have, and make sure that you're having a positive influence in the place is important. And Trevor Hendy, who you may remember as an ex-Ironman and so on, we had him come in and speak to our franchisees one year at our conference, and he had a saying that the conditions are always perfect, and it just speaks to a mindset that you're going to get challenges and bumps, and it's going to be a rainy day one day, and one day you'll drive to work and your tire's flat, or you may not hit the sales budget, but just take a mindset that the conditions are always perfect. Things happen for a reason. If you embrace it with a positive attitude and outlook, then more often than not, good things will come.
Yeah, okay, I like that one. And in terms of the business, what's next for you and for the business in the next few years?
Yeah, we've just hired a CEO to take on our existing territories in Asia Pacific, which is fantastic. So that's been a big change in the business and challenging us in terms of how we operate, but that's allowing myself and Richard to focus on international markets. So we're just expanding into the European market. We've just opened our first location in Leicester in the UK.
Okay.
And are very close to signing our first franchise agreement in the Netherlands. So Dave, his mandate will be to consolidate our existing regions, and then we'll start to look at expansion into new territories. We've earmarked a few European cities and countries, along with some Southeast Asian countries. So the goal, as I said, is 1,000 studios by the end of next year, December 31, 2023. So with the international market and opportunities we have, along with our partners in America, Exponential Fitness, we're pretty confident that we're going to go really close to hitting that goal. So as I said, we're singularly focused on that.
Good stuff. Well, good luck with it all, and congratulations on what you've achieved so far.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks, Cameron.